Hey there, ladies and gents. How are we doing this evening? Welcome to Almaned Paranormal Podcast, Season 2, podcast number 19. Hope y'all are doing wonderful. Please make yourself at home. Don't be shy because questions are always welcome here. Everyone means a lot to me. So I do like to welcome everybody. And if I don't get to you immediately, I promise I will get to you. I promise. You are all very important to this channel. If you're new to the channel and you like what we do here, please hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you can get the notifications when we go live. And lastly, give us a like. We'd appreciate it. So let me introduce my guest tonight, Virginia Paranormal Investigations. Jeff is a U.S. Air Force veteran currently working as an elementary school teacher. He founded Virginia Paranormal Investigation in 2008. The organization investigates reports of paranormal activity ranging from, you guys are going to have fun, ghosts to cryptids and extraterrestrials. He is an author of Ghost of Yorktown, Virginia, a haunted tour guide, and he's owner and operator of Yorktown Ghost Walks. Jeff is currently pursuing a Master's of Divinity. So let's welcome him. Hi there.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. How about yourself?
Oh, well, we have fun here. I'm going to take a brief moment and welcome a few people here. We have Selena. Hello, Selena. And we have Sam Michelle. Welcome. And let's see who else we got. I thought I saw another person. Christina Bell. Hello. Don't be a stranger. And Selena says, welcome, Jeff.
Thank you.
So, I'm trying to pull up everything and it's not wanting to work. What, and of course, I'm the basic questions everybody gets. What was your first paranormal experience?
My first one had to be when I was a kid. It was kind of weird. There was a noise at the back door, and I thought it was the dog. So I went back in the alcove there. It was all dark, and I couldn't see. I just kind of could see the light coming through the door, but I couldn't see down on the ground. So I went in there, I pushed by the dog and opened the door. And when the light came in from the back porch, there was no dog there. And I opened the door, went outside, and the dog came running around from the other side of the house. So he was already outside. So I don't know what it was, but that was the first experience I would probably describe as paranormal.
Ah, that's very interesting. So what exactly got you into the paranormal?
It's really something I've always been into. It's just been the mystery, trying to find answers where in a lot of places you'll probably keep searching. The mystery just keeps growing and growing. And it's the intrigue of the unknown. And ever since I could remember, I mean, when I was old enough to drive, the places we would drive would be out to these haunted locations. We'd drive down these back creepy roads, and that's how we'd spend the nights. So I don't know exactly why, but it's always been there. My dad used to watch all these paranormal shows and sparked my interest with the unknown, unsolved mysteries and UFOs and all that.
Oh, that sounds so fun. My dad, I think, you're talking about the 70s. I was much too young to watch The Exorcist and the Amityville. And my dad just was intrigued with Amityville. And I don't know if you remember these books. They're old books. And it's mainly talking about the Appalachian Mountains, the people that live there, and all the different stories they shared. But in one little section, they had ghost stories. And my dad loved to read those to me as a kid. So Don't know what it is with dads. I want to welcome. I see Sabra is in. Hello, dear. And let's see. Sam said hello, greeted you as well. And everybody's kind of queuing. Oh, Selena's already got a question for you. Did you have any personal paranormal experiences growing up?
Nothing that was extremely personal. The one I mentioned, and there were a few things we saw driving these back roads that we couldn't explain. And I mean, the most personal one, it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't extremely personal, but I had this dream. And I described this man that I saw in my dream. And my mom told me that it was my great uncle. And I had never
Wow.
seen him before prior to this, so I didn't know what he looked like or anything. And I described him apparently to a T. So that was kind of weird, but I don't know to what degree it was paranormal, but that's probably the most, I guess, personal one.
That's really interesting, though. So, how long have you guys been in the paranormal?
Well, I started the team 2008 is when we got together and started the team. And this was a time that I was in the Air Force. And this guy, Scott, we were getting ready to deploy together.
Mm-hmm.
And we had befriended each other during the pre-deployment training down in Valdosta, Georgia, because we had a lot of the same interests. And one of them, we found out, I started talking about haunted places that we would drive around, and he's like, "Oh, you like doing that stuff?" He said, "I love doing that stuff." And long story short, we ended up getting together and going out to places down there on the weekends that we had, and then when we came back, we started going out to these different haunted locations and ended up coming up with the team and getting a couple people together. That is kind of just for fun at the beginning.
Mm-hmm. That's really awesome because I'm here in Georgia, so it's I'm more north. We're right at the base of the Appalachian Mountains, so and both sides of my family are from the Appalachian Mountains, North Georgia. So it's that's very interesting, and I do want to really quickly say thank you for your service.
Oh, I appreciate it.
It's a big thing on my mother's side, so you know.
Oh, that's great.
Sam Michelle says, "How do you go about your investigations, and how do you locate your locations?"
At this point, primarily now, I love to every once in a while get out to a known haunted location, but at this point, the primary cases that we get are people's houses, people that reach out to us and have things going on. Some of the people, they have strange things that they want to know if it's actually paranormal or if there's a natural explanation for it. They're not really bothered, or they're just curious. Other people, they're really bothered by something. So, we
Mhm.
get those people that call us up and want us to come out to their houses, and we go all across the state. We've even gone down as far as Georgia and as far up as Scranton, Pennsylvania for a private investigation.
Wow.
Uh, but and of course we don't charge anything for it. We just we do it to help people and out of our interests of the paranormal. But did that answer the question, or were you more so like
Actually,
how do we actually conduct them?
actually, that I think you did pretty good because that was one of my questions. Was I know because I've followed you for quite some time now, and I know a lot of your investigations are residential cases, and I I've asked other people this and they thought it was such a strange question is do you charge for your investigations? Because believe it or not, there are some teams out there that do charge and you
Yeah,
know,
yeah. There's quite
that's
a
nice.
few.
Mhm.
And we get that question all the time. Like people ask that though when they call up, how much is this going to cost me? And when I tell them we don't charge anything, they're usually like shocked and
Mhm.
excited. You know what I mean? Because
Yes.
they want to get this help, but they don't know, how much something like this is going to cost. And we
I'm
just don't feel it ethical to charge them
right. Well,
just our behalf.
that's our thing too is I'm a firm believer if people are going to say we're going to charge you to investigate what is frightening you or to that, am I crazy? And if they're going to charge you, you hang up that phone and you find another person, because
Right.
it just doesn't feel right with me. Do you ever find old forgotten places by adventuring?
Yes, and that's such an awesome thing. Now, the thing is, of course, a lot of times they'll have posted signs, because we'll drive all over the state, and I love to take the back roads because you miss so much by just sticking to the interstate. And of course, you'll be driving through the country, and you'll see these old houses back in the woods, or
Mm-hmm.
this old farmhouse that looks like a typical haunted house that you'd see in a movie. And I want to go and check them out, but it's usually there's a posted sign somewhere around there,
Mm-hmm.
so we don't mess around with it. On the occasion where we have one that's accessible to us, either someone owns it and says, "Hey, come and check this out," or else it's kind of really in the middle of nowhere and there's no signs visible. Other than that, we don't really get much of an opportunity to do it, though. Not as much as I'd like to. Like, I would love to go out to more places like that because they're kind of like a lot of them are kind of like frozen in time.
Yes.
You walk into these houses that some of them it looks like people just up and left,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still furniture in there, and of course, it depends on how close to the city it is or what, because a lot of them people go out to so much that it's kind of lost that feel. They've destroyed it and spray
Mm-hmm.
painted and you know made a mess of it. But if you find that right place where it's, hey, no one's been there. I remember going wandering to an old store. I forget where it was. I was thinking it was out towards Surrey. And we're just driving down and we see this building back in the trees. So we stopped in the parking lot across the street and we got out and walked up to it and looked in the window. And it was sure enough, it was an old store, and there were still old like boxes
Oh.
where they would have the cigarettes in there and the
Mm-hmm.
old counter and the furniture and shelves, some things on the shelves. So it was neat to find something like that.
That is really interesting. I remember one of the stories growing up my mom always told us, and it's actually not far from where I live. So that makes it even more unusual. As my mom and my father were walking in the woods behind their house and found a house that was completely open, had dishes on the table, food on the plates. I mean, it had been abandoned for a long time. I mean, because she
Wow.
said you could see the dust, and she told my dad, she's like, "We're getting out of here. There's something not right with this."
Yeah,
So,
it sounds like there's food on the plate. It's like those people left in the middle of a meal.
right. Um, and Selena did say, as a mom of a veteran and an active member, thank you very much for your service.
I really appreciate it. My pleasure.
Okay. So one of the things I enjoy about your team is you guys like to think outside the box when it comes to equipment. What are your more traditional equipment, and what are some of the more outside the box equipment you like to use on your investigations?
Well, we like to use the typical stuff that you would think of: EMF detectors. We'll use the K2 meters, and of course, digital voice recorders. We'll use the REM pod. A lot of, like I said, a lot of the traditional stuff you'd think of, just because we want to
Mhm.
test it. We want to know what it does and see what kind of results we get from it. And I don't believe I've found any apps that have worked that have been legit, like for the phones. But we like to experiment with them just so we can, be informed of how far off they are, or try to say why they don't work.
Right.
Or, if there is ever one that does work, we could say, hey, we got some interesting results with this. But I like to use stuff that's not made for paranormal investigation. I used to go into Sears and just spend hours walking around like the tool section
Mhm.
and the electronics section, and just think like, okay, how could this stuff be applied to paranormal investigation? And just ended up getting some weird things. I don't even remember. We don't even use a lot of them now, but things that, like I said, aren't made for paranormal investigation. So currently, we'll use like an Etch a Sketch, which I don't know. It's if
Right.
something writes on it, there's no way that we can chalk that up to any kind of natural explanation, because you literally got to turn the knobs on them.
Right.
I'll take a slinky along. We'll take a cat toy that's got a bell in it, like a ball, cat ball with a bell in it. And we'll use some things that I'm sure I don't watch a lot of stuff on TV or even on YouTube as much as I'd like to, but we'll take what is it? The carbon monoxide detectors, and we'll take them through the house. We'll take a natural gas detector, just anything that we can find that will monitor the environment, and just to put that together with the investigation and see if any of this stuff that's in the environment has any impact on the activity that they're experiencing, even if it's just for statistics reasons. You know what I mean? Like, this many houses have natural gas and this many houses are experiencing this type of activity. Maybe there's some kind of connection. So we like to monitor the atmosphere. And we're always looking for stuff that we can use, like I said, that wasn't made for the investigation.
The Etch-a-Sketch, I absolutely loved. I love that. And you did, in one investigation, I think it was a private resident, and you were like, "Who did that?" And there were some lines drawn. I just thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, that was an interesting case. It was in a place in Unionville. And I know it because it's the only time there was something written on the Etch-a-Sketch. So it was in Unionville, and we were standing right there, and the washer would turn on. You had to push a button to turn it on.
Yeah.
And looking into the like this as being a common problem with this washer or any kind of manufacturer's explanation for it, there really we couldn't find one. So it was interesting that this was, going on, and then the Etch-a-Sketch was drawn on. We came in from outside, and it was drawn on. And the lady had stayed in there. Will was the one that went in and found it.
Yep.
But the clients, we've been there a couple times to investigate that house. They're very credible people, and Will sometimes, he messes around. So I questioned him. I was like, "You drew on that," but no, he didn't. He, because he fesses up when he messes around with stuff like that. And I could tell from his reaction, he was pretty shocked by it himself. He was the one that found it. And I was almost convinced, because I wasn't expecting this to actually work, the Etch-a-Sketch.
Right.
So it's like, you had to draw on that, but he declined it. And when you look at the thing, I didn't get a good picture of it. I have it on the video, but when you look at the thing that's drawn on there, it would kind of take a minute to get that in there. You know what I mean? It's not like somebody was able to just walk in there and
because it was different.
and walk out.
Yeah, it was several different lines, and it was very interesting. I just was shocked to see that.
Yeah. And the only thing is, I wish I had a camera on it. But the problem comes in, like, whenever we put up cameras, nothing ever happens where the cameras are. And then when we don't have, and it's even like that with the handheld camera. The second I turn it off, something happens. And I remember one time we were at this residential investigation, and I stopped recording, right? I just turned the camera off and lowered it, and the door to the bedroom opened. And I was like, "You got to be kidding me." Like, I'd never seen anything like that except for maybe once. And now I didn't get it on video, but luckily we debunked it, because one of our guys, David, was sitting on the floor against the wall. And if you lean just in the right spot on the wall, the door will open. Now, when you close the door, it has to click twice. So if you just close it and it clicks once, it's not fully closed. And that's how it must have been, because it was closed once. He hit the wall and it opened. And I was glad we debunked it, because if I missed that and it was actual activity, that'd be a big one to miss.
I want to say a quick thank you to Joe for the Facebook like. And Sabrina says, "Thank you, Jeff, for your services. Granddaughter of a World War I vet." Wow.
Oh, awesome. Thank you.
And even Selena says, "Oh my gosh, an Etch-a-Sketch is an awesome idea." Not a ghost. Husband and child. So if you could only bring 3 items to an investigation, what would you bring?
I'd bring a digital voice recorder, a camera, and a flashlight.
I like that. Good.
Yeah. In fact, a lot of the ones we go to, just like we'll go out to, if it's not someone's house, I'll say, let's just take a recorder and something to take pictures with and maybe a video. And that's,
That's
that's
all
it.
you need.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Now, I know you guys have gone to a couple military forts as well as, and I did a thing on the battleship USS North Carolina a while back. I was wondering, since you have military background, did you find that helpful in these locations?
To an extent, maybe with the battleship, not quite as much, because to be able to serve on a battleship,
Right.
that takes a completely probably different mindset,
Yeah.
with what they have to go through. But just maybe with some of the forts, I would like to think as an overall, I can bring an overall understanding perhaps of what they have been going through and try to empathize and,
Yeah.
understand what they're going through.
Yeah. That's really
Right.
awesome.
And relate to them in that way. But there was one guy who said, look, when you're talking to these soldiers, you got to talk to them like you're, like command them, like tell them like,
Mhm.
hey, private, tell me your rank, whatever. And I haven't quite found that to be effective. I haven't, but I'm not one to really try that, I suppose,
It's interesting
because
because I interviewed Brian Murray, who used to be on Ghost Hunters,
yeah.
and he was in the Marines and he was a drill sergeant in the Marines. So he went to a couple of forts. I guess it's the drill sergeant in him. I don't know, but he said it helped him a little bit. But I mean, drill sergeants would scare almost anybody. I don't care, living or not.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was wondering. Like, if I talk to them like, and I was never a drill sergeant, but if you talk to them like a drill sergeant, geez, I don't know if they'd want to communicate or not. They might be heading the other way.
Right. I want to welcome Full Dark Paranormal, Amy. Great, great team right there. A lovely, lovely couple. Does your team have any kind of rituals before and after your investigations? I mean, um, some groups will pray, some, like to have their medals or crystals or anything.
No, no, we don't have anything really like that. We primarily are Christian based, but we have members that are not necessarily. So we don't push any one way as being the way that you have to
Right.
prepare or have to, uh, you know, claim safety after the investigation. We kind of leave it up to the individual and their own faith
Okay.
for the most part.
That's wonderful. Um, your videos, and I love this, your videos called Paranormal Shakedown are so interesting, especially the location. And I hope I get this right. Murder in Henrico, right?
Yes, Henrico.
Henrico. Oh,
Yeah.
do you mind explaining to everyone what Paranormal Shakedown is all about? And do you guys have planned to do more?
Sure. Yeah. So Paranormal Shakedown about 2 or 3 years ago, I think was when we did them. They came from some talks that we did a while back with people that were looking for a show. And we're like, well, let's do one that ties the paranormal with cold cases. And they never liked the idea or never got back to us with it. So a while down the road, we kind of revived the idea. And it was basically, you would go look up cold cases. The first part, we tell the story about the cold case, and then in the second part, we go out to that location or any locations that are associated with it and do a paranormal investigation. The hopes is that either we'll be able to get a response from the person who was the victim, or perhaps any spirits that may have been in the area that may have been witness to the crimes that took place.
That's
As far as
interesting.
planning to do more, yes, we would like to. I have one that we did last. The last one we did was back in February, and I just had never found the time to put it together. We didn't get a whole lot from it by any means, but I'd still like to put it out there. And yeah, we've actually been talking about doing a couple more of them. We have 10 total in mind that we want to get done
Oh,
over the next, hopefully, a couple months here. And that's 10 total, including the ones that we've already done. So I'm not sure how many that is left to do.
they were so much fun. I liked watching those.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Let's see. Sam Michelle says, "Do you ever have attachments, or I would say something that followed you home?"
Me personally, no. I've never had much luck with anything following me home.
Knock on wood.
Right. No, I've never had anything. Fortunately, I haven't had anything follow me home. No, but there's been some cases within the team where there's been something that seemed to follow people home. One of them was from the Exchange Hotel out in Gordonsville. One of our members saw something in the back of her car when she was leaving, and to the point where she stopped the car and hopped out because she thought someone was sitting back there.
Oh,
That was a pretty prominent one. And then Linda had something that had come back with her, and it seemed to be around the house. If I recall right, she described it as kind of being a dark presence. She had that sensation of being watched, and it was there for a short period of time and then gone.
oh. Okay, that would really just freak me out. Seeing something in the back of your car. No, thank you. I just want to say hello to Michael. Hello, hello. Um, Now you guys also do a lot of investigations on historical homes. Oh my God. And I have to ask, which one is your favorite?
Oh boy. I'd have to say one of my favorites was this place called the Parkgate Plantation in, it slips my mind exactly where it was. I think it was not far from Manassas, not incredibly far from Manassas, but it goes back to literally that the land was where the first settler that came inland set up his cabin, like way back, and then he lost his land when the British came, or I forget the story, the whole story behind it. But what was cool is that first cabin that he built out there, the grandson had come back years later, and this would have been in like the 1800s, and he built or no, it was before that. It was the 1700s. He had built a summer kitchen up around this cabin that was there, around the chimney to it. So it's still the original chimney from the first settler, like back in the 1600s. This was a place where George Washington's niece, I believe, lived there at this plantation. So on his way from Mount Vernon to, I forget where he was going, but he would stop and spend the night at this plantation house. And the guy that owned it, it was quite an event because he just had it because he loved the history of it. So he had the place next to it. He ran some stables, and he found out about the history of this Parkgate Plantation. He said, "I got to buy that house," and it literally, it's just basically gonna be an antique. And he had it, all the furniture, like the rope beds and everything in there, like set up the way it was. But this was also a place that seemed to have quite a bit of activity, and I'm talking about quite often we'll try a spirit box session. This one, every time we did an EVP session, there was something coming through where we didn't even pull out the spirit box until the night was almost over because we were getting such good results through the EVP sessions. Pretty cool because a place that's not investigated a lot. And it seems like in those places that aren't investigated a lot, spirits are more willing to talk.
Right. I There was one you did. I just fell in love with the house. Um, I think the gentleman bought it in 2012, and originally was a cellar and a one room, and then they abandoned the other property, moved in, built a second cellar. The kitchen was down in the cellar.
The Woodlawn Tribble House.
Yes.
Yeah, that was when we did about 6
Oh,
years ago, I want to say.
oh my gosh. It has stuck with me because I have absolutely loved that house. I mean, it just blew my mind.
It was an
And
amazing house. Like you
it,
would see the actual like they didn't have a single nail in the whole house. It was like all wood
mm-hmm,
pegs that was you holding it together, and the wood burning stove in the basement.
mm-hmm.
And that thing, the wood burning stove in the basement would heat up the whole house. There were like kind of spaces between the floorboards, and the heat would just come up through the entire house from that
Oh,
basement.
wow. That's amazing. To think how they lived back then and how creative they were
Yeah,
in that. It just
that
blows
was
my
a great
mind.
place. And
Yeah.
what was crazy about that, if my memory serves me right, because like I said, that was about, I want to say 6 years ago. But we had a guy with us on the investigation who was blind. He was one of our investigators.
Mhm.
And he talked about this seeing someone, and I guess he saw it kind of in like the mind's eye type of thing. He
Mhm.
wasn't a medium by any means, but he would
Right.
often get like sensations that someone was there. And he pointed, he said someone came by and walked right through there, and where they walked through was a wall. So we were thinking, oh well, he obviously is not sure where he's pointing. But the guy that owned the place, he said actually there used to be a door there where he's pointing to. So it's almost like this spirit was still walking through that door that's no longer there.
That was amazing. That blew my mind. I mean, I was like, "Oh, that place was just gorgeous, gorgeous." So Michael has a question for you. Have you ever investigated on Day of the Dead? And if you have, was it more active or the same as other investigations?
I can't say for 100% sure I have on Day of the Dead. I really don't know. We'd go every other weekend. So if that happened to fall on a weekend that we went on, I probably wouldn't have even paid as much of attention to it, honestly. But I have noticed on certain times, it seems like we'll get a lot more calls around October. And I think I don't know if it's because that veil is actually thin,
Mhm.
or if it's because people's eyes are more so turned to the paranormal because of the
Mm.
season that it is.
Yep.
So I really don't, but I will tell you this, and given the tours in Yorktown, uh, in the month from the end of September till at least mid-October, it seems like the activity is heightened. Like there'll be some interesting
Oh,
pictures that
wow.
are caught. People will hear and see some things that at a increased frequency than they will on the rest of the year. But it's tough to say if it's because of Halloween or because of that time of year, because
Mhm.
also the 28th through the October 19th is the anniversary of the siege. So could it be because of the anniversary of the battle, or could it be because of Halloween?
Yep. That's interesting. That's so interesting. And I would just want to say a quick thank you to Betty Sue for the Facebook like. Thank you. I appreciate it. Um, so as we talked about in the beginning, that your team does a lot of residential investigations. Um, what kind of procedures do you do with the family before you actually take the case on?
We don't really screen them. And I've gotten I've had some words, I guess, from the team for that, because we don't screen them at all. We just take any case, really. And some of them, because we're going so far, some of them are out in the western part of the state that takes 7 hours to travel to. It's not feasible to really go out there and come back. So what we'll do, the best we'll do is questions over the phone. We'll
Right.
ask them some questions about the activity. We'll go through a little interview form with them, and basically just go on what they're saying. We don't expect them to have to show us evidence or anything like that, because we know how hard it is to catch evidence. Even
Mhm.
if you're living in the house, it's
Mhm.
not like you're going to have surveillance cameras in every room, or you're going to catch something at the right time. So we just basically take them on their word, and go through the interview and find out what activity is going on, and kind of get an idea of if it's going to be something a little more aggressive or not, and then go into the investigation.
Oh my goodness. He wants to know if you've ever investigated on. Isn't that the same thing, Day of the Dead? And notice more activity. Honey, that he's already asked that question.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, let me explain because a lot of people don't know the Mexican tradition.
Okay.
Dia de los Angelitos is at November 1st on 12 a.m. and that's the spirits of the children. Then November 2nd on 12 a.m. is the Dia de los Difuntos, and that is spirits of the adults on November 2nd.
Okay.
And then at noon at November 2nd is the Dia de los Muertes, which is the spirits of all dead. So this whole thing about Americans mostly thinking that it's only one day is 3 days in total.
Now, in Europe,
we have All Saints
November
Day.
the 1st is All Saints Day.
Right, that's correct. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Leave it to my husband. So
Yeah,
I guess
I can't say for sure. It's something we should have paid attention to, I'm sure, because I mean we'll look at like the moon phases and anything in the atmosphere that can lead into the investigations. We've even looked into if based on the activity, if there was anything, if it looked like it was leaning towards like witchcraft or anything like that, if there's anything significant with that. But I haven't really paid attention much to. I know we've done investigations on Halloween before, just because I can't even remember exactly where they were, but I can't say for sure that we have or have not. If it fell on, because the way we do the investigations, honestly, is every other weekend, because that's when my daughter goes with her mom. So we'll go out, we'll book all the cases on that every other weekend, and we'll go out and do them. Anywhere from 1 to 3 cases a weekend, sometimes more if they're in the same area. But if it falls on that weekend, it does. If not, we don't really try to plan it for a particular day or anything like that.
What I found interesting is, when we were discussing, what procedures y'all have for residential cases. And like you said, you don't make the residents, the homeowners, go, okay, here's evidence. What I found interesting by that is I interviewed Keith Linder, and he's a gentleman that's out in Seattle and didn't believe in the paranormal, nothing, nothing at all, and ended up moving into a haunted home. And the one thing he said to me that I found so incredible, and he was trying to explain it to all these teams that, they call him up on the phone and ask him questions, and they're like, okay, we're going to do this and this. And he goes, you do know the spirits are listening to you.
Yeah.
He's like, you can't
exactly
plan
right.
anything. They listen. He's like, so. And
right.
when you said that, I was like, there you go.
Yeah, because if it was a case where somebody felt, that it was more so aggressive, I'll tell them on the phone. I'll say, don't talk about it really in the house. You know what I mean? Don't talk about it much because you're going to feed into it. And if you're sitting there saying your feelings, it's going to know your feelings. So don't talk about your feelings towards it in the house.
Yeah.
That you got something that's feeding off of your fear, and you're telling, it hears you telling your family and getting all worked up and everything else. I'm like, yeah, got them where I want them. Yeah.
Right. Hey, Janine. And I would imagine if somebody called you with children, that's pretty top priority if the children are being affected or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. If there's something that, if there's a case that we have scheduled that's, like I said, someone that's just curious, and someone calls up and they have kids that are getting scratched, of course we'll move that up. It's been weird because up until about July, we were usually booked about 3 months out with investigations. Like if we got a new case, we'd have to put them usually about 3 months out.
Mhm.
And now we've got nothing on the books. So I don't know what's been going on. But I told Linda, she changed around the form a little bit on our website. I was like, maybe people don't want to fill out that form, and that's what it is. I don't know.
So Michelle asks a very interesting question. Do you ever find water source on a very active location?
Yeah, all the time, but I can't say 100% that the water source definitely adds to it, because I've also found places that weren't near a water source that were very active. But one thing we do keep in mind, of course, is, and we had one guy, David, he hasn't been with us for some time. He comes out occasionally, but he would actually focus on that. We had him focus on the environmental aspect of it. And he would look at any water that was in the area, rivers, streams, also train tracks, power lines, any kind of wildlife that might be in the area that might make noises that we're not used to. And he would get a record of all that stuff. So we could kind of, once again, use statistics like, hey, does it look like it? Does the water seem to have any impact on it, or the power lines, or any of these things,
That's interesting. Wow. Because I followed and I did an interview with Andrea Perrin, and she hates, I call it the farmhouse because she hates Conjuring House. She hates it. But the one thing I thought was really interesting is underneath the house is a massive aqueduct.
Oh, that's interesting.
Massive.
Yeah.
The past owner and the new owners, the Heinzens, have both been approached by corporations to want to drill a well. That's how big it is. And it's right underneath the house.
That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then you got that whole area has got tons of ley lines and, oh, good Lord, you name it. It's crazy. Now, this is, I really get a kick out of this. You guys also do what's called gas, grubs, and ghosts. And
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much. Will you share with everybody this whole idea? Because I
Yeah, that's
enjoyed
probably
it.
my favorite.
It's fun.
Yeah, one time we were going on a trip up to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. And I said, we should try something a little bit different. We should try just recording everything. And Linda was like, what do you mean? I was like, everything. Like, we're going to stop at this Royal Farms up the way. That's going to be in the video, And so we did. We recorded every place we ate at, every place we stopped for coffee, talked about our experiences along the way, the trip up there, showed a little bit about where we were going, the investigation, and then the trip back. And we that became known as Gas Grove. Basically, what we'll do is just give everybody a window into the trip, take people on the trip with us. Mm-hmm. So it's not and like ghost hunters that you'd see on TV or anything that's professional by any means. It's literally the real raw what happens during these weekends where we're out doing investigations, packed with investigations. The investigations are falling through or getting canceled, and we're wandering around looking for something to do because we're out in the middle of Petersburg. It's stuff like that. It's just the trip. It's taking people on the trip with us, and whatever trouble we get into along the way, which is usually mild, but
I love it because there will be certain things. It's like you wanted that blue Pepsi so bad.
Yeah.
And I was like, is he ever going to find a place that has blue Pepsi? But I love it because it's just not gas stations that you're eating, but you're also finding little businesses and going, okay, well, let's just give it a try. And y'all all rate I love it. It's so much fun. And
there's so much unique things to see out there, in these little towns and stuff. Mm-hmm. There's so much unique.
And what's the favorite gas station y'all like?
Sheetz.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sheetz is one of our favorites. Now I got to say, they have this one chip challenge
Oh,
that's out now, and it is the most brutal thing that I've probably ever done, other than being OC sprayed. And the chip, it's in this coffin, is a single
yeah.
chip with Reaper powder on it, and we've tried that over the past couple trips, and it didn't end well for some of us. Not at all. And I included those in the videos, of course. And then I put together like a little compilation of all three of us trying them, or all four of us. And what was cool is our one Will, he tried to do it we were in a haunted house. And he said, I'm going to eat this chip, and then I'm going to try. If you go 10 minutes, that's like the minimum amount of time you can go and not basically be like completely defeated by the chip. So he said, I'm going to eat this chip and do a 10-minute EVP session. And it was an interesting concept. But it didn't go past like 1 minute and 40 seconds.
Oh my God. That's awful.
Yeah.
Welcome, TD. And they have a question. What's the Wawa thing?
Wawa. Yeah, that's another gas station / convenience store. They're popular in the Northeast, and they've come down as far as Virginia, as the farthest I've seen them south. But they used to just primarily be up in Delaware, Pennsylvania. And it's just a gas station, but it's you go in there, and they used to be known for their hoagies. So you go in there and get something to eat. And they have good food.
That is just so much fun. I get a kick out of that. I mean, and you guys have such a good time. I mean, y'all have gone camping and everything. So oh my goodness, that is the different things you come up with are just they're so fun. And then the serious side kicks in.
We have a good time.
Oh, Janine, she's in Florida, and she says they have Wawa. And TD says,
really?
Nicer than gas stations we have.
That's cool. I didn't know they made it down that far. That's awesome.
So, if money was an issue and you could go anywhere in the world to investigate, where would that location be?
I'd like to go to Alcatraz.
Ooh.
Yeah, I think that would be a pretty cool investigation, because I've found, and I don't know I don't know a whole lot about, I like history, but I don't know about a whole lot about the history of Alcatraz. But I do know that, it's basically people couldn't escape from there. It's on an island.
Mm-hmm.
And what's pretty cool, and of course, aside from the fact that some of the worst criminals were put in here, and the violence that occurred there, I found that it seems spirits will act up when they find out that you don't have a easy way to escape. For example, if you yeah, it's like for example, one time I was security forces, and we were doing building checks when I was in the military. And there was this one haunted house that we'd go in, and because the door would be open, and we'd go in and check it out. Always some strange things would happen in there, but we're walking up through this basement, and the two guys went up ahead and they closed the door, right? And the door was locked. Now, I wasn't even aware that the door was locked when they closed it. Like, we were locked in the basement because I hadn't even made it up to the top of the stairs yet. But it was these long metal stairs that they installed going way down into this dirt basement. And I hear something heavily running up those stairs behind me, like boom, boom, boom on the staircase, right? And I turn around and shine my flashlight there. There's nothing on the stairs. Well, I noticed this didn't happen until they locked us in the basement. It was almost like, they have nowhere to go. So now I'm gonna scare them, or now I'm gonna mess with them. And I've kind of noticed this in places that where you turn off your car. You're sitting there with your car running, nothing happens, but then you turn off the car and take the keys out. Then you hear some kind of crazy sound, or you hear something. And sometimes, it might be, your mind, because you also know that, I got to put the key back in and turn it. But other times there's been indisputable sounds that we've all heard. So with Alcatraz, this place is out on an island. If someone took you out there, dropped you off, and left you out there, You know what I mean? And these spirits
Oh,
know that you have
yes.
no way to escape until they come
Oh,
back for
yes.
you. They might start to really kick up, and that's kind of what I would like to see.
The interesting thing I would like to see as well is having a female person there as well.
Oh yeah,
And because they're going to there was no females there, so because that's I listened to Brushy Mountain Prison in Tennessee, and they do tours there, and they say women are the only ones that really, really, really get the um, you know acknowledgement, I should say.
right.
So that sounds interesting. And Full Dark Paranormal says Alcatraz would be awesome to see. And she likes what you said. That's something really to ponder. That if you can't escape, they
Right.
know they
Yeah.
got you. Um, Michael says, Jeff, what's your funniest Halloween moment? And what's your funniest investigation moment?
Funniest Halloween moment. Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, the only thing that really sticks out as far as Halloween was when I was a little kid, and I went up to this door, and they had the screen doors, that had the solid bottom.
Hmm.
And I rang the doorbell, and I'm standing there in front of the screen door, and then all of a sudden, this like bald head came rising up from in front of the screen door, and it was this guy in a costume. But I took off out of there, and then I never went to that house again on Halloween. I know that. I mean that's the only thing I
Oh
can
my
really think of though.
goodness. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, what was the second part of that one?
What is your funniest investigative moment?
Oh, I have to make sure I mean, there's one I could say, but I don't know if I would offend that person, so I won't say that one. Um, so I have to think of another one. Oh, okay. There was one, and the guy himself thought this was funny too. This guy out in Roanoke, Virginia, he called me up because he said he started seeing the spirit of his dog, and the dog would follow him wherever he went. Like even when he went to his parents' house, the dog would be sleeping. He'd feel him come walking up on the bed, and he'd be laying there at the foot of the bed. Dog would follow him around everywhere. Well, after a while, another dog shows up, and he's thinking like, where'd this other dog come from? And he clarified it was another ghost dog. Right? These were both ghost dogs that are following him around. And he said, then all of a sudden, these puppies show up. And I had to confirm with him. I was like ghost puppies, right? And he said, yeah. He said, I didn't even know how that could happen or if that could happen, but I'm seeing these two ghost dogs and these ghost puppies following me all over the place. Well, as he would be sitting in his room or in his living room, the puppies would come up and suckle on his middle finger. And when they would do that, he said it would drain my energy. So he would take these puppies and the dogs and go all over, go out to Food Line and stuff like that, and they'd follow him. And he said that the other ghosts that happened to be among the skyline of Roanoke would see these puppies, and they'd fall in love with them. So they'd follow him back to his house, and each one had their own puppy that they liked. And uh, it was an interesting case. So the main thing was like you'd think, hey, he wants to find out what's going on here. But the thing was his dog had disappeared. And it wasn't the concern that he had all these strange, and he had nicknames for all these ghosts, and they would do some obscene things. But it wasn't so much that they were there as it was that he was wondering what happened to the ghost of his dog. His dog disappeared. So he wanted to find out. But we took Will out there. And everything this guy said he experienced, Will stepped up and decided he was going to test it out. Like the guy's like, well, when I'm laying in my bed, I can feel the puppies walking around on me. So we had Will lay in bed with the guy. He's laying there, and the guy's like, yeah, you feel it like on your face. And Will's like, yeah, I kind of feel it. And then the guy's like, well, they like to act up when when I'm in the shower. You know what I mean? They like to get in the shower with me. So Will got into the shower. I mean, he didn't, he just stood in there, rolled up his pants, and turned on the water. did a spirit box session in the shower. You know what I mean? So it was like kind of a funny case like that, where it was just one thing after another. But I'll tell you, you know, and this guy himself, he said, this sounds crazy. He said, I know this sounds crazy. And of course, it sounded something that we haven't really heard before. But when we got back and we were reviewing the audio from it, there's actually a puppy that barks on the EVP session, and then a woman's voice. And there was no women there except for Linda. And he mentioned one of the spirits, two of the spirits being women that were, you know, that were there. And his house is like on the side of a mountain. There's no other dogs around, no yards near him or anything. So we couldn't tell where that puppy yip had come from. It was pretty interesting. But it's just funny. Just going through the whole course of that night was one laugh after another.
That has to be the most bizarre investigation I've ever heard. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely.
But to get the puppy bark in a female voice.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's what threw us off, because the guy, like I said, the guy himself, he said, you guys are going to think I'm nuts. He even pointed at the cameras like, every one of you watching is going to think I'm nuts. And, you know, I mean, it sounded out there, pretty far out.
Yeah.
You know, and he admitted that. But then when we listened to that, we weren't sure we were going to get anything. And we listened to that, we're like, that's really weird.
Oh my goodness. That is wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, I can't say that's the funniest, but it was up there. It was among them.
Okay, so I have to ask, have you or anyone on your team ever been scratched, touched, hair pulled, clothes pulled, anything like that on an investigation?
I have not. Linda had been touched by something before. She'd been growled at too at one investigation that they went to.
Mm.
We've had clients that have been scratched, fairly frequent cases with people being scratched. But as far as our own team members, no. I mean, there have been people that have been with us on investigations that were not team members anymore, or were only with us a short period of time, that had claimed things had gone on, but there was, you know, we hadn't seen anything. There's nothing there where they said there was or anything like that. So it was just kind of their word for it. But personally, no, I never have. The closest thing, and I don't know what this was. I still think there's a rational explanation for it. We were upstairs at this one house in Norfolk, I believe it was. But one of our guys, Jack, he said, can you touch one of us? You know, and I always say, when they say that, I say, probably not me. But he said that, and I was leaning up against the wall recording. You know, I was kind of leaning on the doorway, and I felt like around my ankle. It's almost, if you were to take like the elastic at the top of the sock and pull it, how it tightens. It felt like that kind of. And it was there for a few moments and then gone. And I had never really, I didn't find, I mean, obviously nothing was pulling on my sock or anything like that. So the only thing I could think is maybe the way I was leaning, like I had hit some kind of a nerve that was, you know, I really couldn't explain it. But I didn't say 100% it was me being touched by a spirit, but it was interesting.
I have to ask because I love to hear people's different views on when somebody's being scratched. Because you do hear some people go, oh, if you're scratched and it's 3 scratches, it's demonic, the D word. And you have other people, you know, with. So what is your opinion about the whole getting scratched thing? I mean,
I'm sure there's numerous things that it could be. I mean, and one thing I've found, right, for sure with paranormal investigation is when people are convinced of something, they're convinced of it. I've had people show me a picture that was clearly a flash reflecting off an insect. You could see the wings and the legs.
Yep.
they're convinced it's a fairy. You know what I mean? Or they take a picture and on a misty day and get orbs in their pictures that are clearly like water particles, but they don't hear that at all. They already determined it's something paranormal, and that's what they go with. So some of these people that they do to consider, they do have animals that sleep in the bed. Sometimes it's dogs, right? Or cats, and of course scratches can come from that. Sometimes people can accidentally scratch themselves as they're sleeping, or their significant other can scratch them. So there's those things that kind of need to be ruled out. It's the possibility for that. Even in how we perceive things, I think that a lot of times what people will think is something being malevolent or trying to scare them is not necessarily that. We don't know how things are on that side of the veil and how they go about trying to get attention. And they may not perceive themselves as literally scratching somebody, you know what I mean? Or they may not come out and be like, I'm going to knock this thing over because I'm mad. They may just be trying to get attention and trying to reach through. And sometimes this happens. So we keep an open mind to it, and pair it with other activity that's going on in the house, of course. What else is going on as far as the activity? Is there, other than this one isolated incident, is there anything else that would lead us to believe that it's malevolent or that it's not malevolent? Is this just one isolated incident, or is this something that happens every night? Is another thing to consider too.
And that's the one thing I really like, and really sucked me into, watching, because I've watched all for quite a while, and it, y'all are never the one to just go, it's this, and oh, this is going off, so it must be this. Y'all are very level-headed, and what I like is in your investigations, you break things down, you talk things, you explain things. You keep the viewers, oh, okay, well, I didn't think of it. Critical thinking. That's what I call it. Critical thinking. That's what you make people think. Okay, could it be this, or could it be that? That's what I love it. Y'all are just very leveled-headed, wonderful people. I get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I found that, at this point, there's more questions than there were at the beginning. And that's how it is. Hey, 10 years ago, oh yeah, this is a perfect characteristic of a residual haunting, and this is this, and this is this, and this is going to detect ghosts, and this is going to tell us what they're, but now it's like, well, maybe this does, and maybe that is, and well, there's this, there's more questions than there are answers now.
That's the one thing I love is, like you said in the beginning, when all the paranormal was popular, everybody was equipment, and this is going to answer everything. But now, as I'm interviewing people, I'm hearing more people go, yeah, we still use some of our equipment, but really we just sit and be quiet and just listen, and
yeah,
that's the interesting thing, is you're slowly seeing a change in the paranormal world a little bit.
Yeah, passive investigation is a big one. Because I found a lot of times when we're just sitting there, and it kind of happened by accident, we'd be sitting there discussing something, and we'd pick up a response, or something would interact with something that we had out, but it wouldn't when we directly approached it. So every once in a while, we'll sit there and we'll just start talking about something completely different, and sure enough, something will come out and want to interact.
Saber has a question. She says, I heard that if you think in a negative way, that you will bring on negative spirits or demons.
Oh, that's a good question. I think in a lot of cases, whatever's there is there. If you're talking like a historic house, there's probably spirits that have been there for some time, depending on how old the house is and when the incident happened, and they're going to stay there with the house no matter who moves in, and whether it's empty or not. But then you have the spirits that kind of stick with people, and these spirits that will certain, of course, if you get into the realm of elementals and such, these spirits that feed off of negative emotion and they feed off of depression and they kind of grow stronger with that. They're like parasites, and they grow off of that stuff. Then yeah, I think a lot of times the negative thoughts would feed them. That's just my opinion on it, though, of course.
That's okay. Everybody has, we all have rights to our opinion. Absolutely. And she said the other one is not to wish bad anything on someone who has done you wrong because of the negative energies and or demon thing.
Yeah, if you're talking about so if you're talking about in the demon, in the demonic realm, so there's some people that seem to have an attachment, and we've directed them towards what's called a deliverance. And in that, one of the things is forgiving people that have wronged you, because of the belief that holding on to that hatred towards them, it gives this demon, if you will, a right to stay attached to that person.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Full Dark has a good one for you. She said, is that something you've tested before in a lot of places, being cornered on purpose to see what responses you get?
To an extent. Will is often our guy for that, so we'll stick him down in a basement or in an attic or something like that, and leave him alone down there for a while. There's been an occasion where something has happened, but there's been a lot of times where it's been no different than if it was all of us down there. And that seemed to be kind of par for the course. Like, we've noticed the responses do seem better with less people. I will say that. With less people, it seems to be better responses. But as far as putting yourself in that situation where you're cornered, it's been hit or miss, I'd have to say. I don't think it's really, I mean, perhaps the spirit or whatever's there knows that we have that lifeline. You know what I mean? I guess there's a difference between having a radio and being like, hey, if I call, you're going to come down and get me. All right. And there's a difference between, oh, someone just locked me down here and they left and I have no way to get out, you know? So I guess we haven't pushed it quite to that level.
Saber says she sees what you mean, more of a personal demon.
Right. Absolutely.
And then Full Dark says, that's really interesting to consider. She says, I definitely agree on less people equal more responses as well. And I think so too, because if you get too many people, then I mean, even if you want to think in the spirit world and you're in a home, and you have all these crew come in, it can be overwhelming. I mean,
Right.
it's overwhelming on the living.
Right. And I wonder sometimes if that's why places that aren't investigated as much seem to offer such good results sometimes, because the spirits have never been asked these questions before. You know, where maybe in some places that they run tours through and they're constantly bringing people through every weekend, who knows? Maybe the spirits are like, you know what, I'm not messing around with these people anymore. They're always coming here asking me questions. I'm always answering them, and I'm getting nothing out of it.
Getting tired.
You know?
Right.
So, who knows?
Because that's what I talked about before this whole thing, the word we will never use. Before this started, I even was like, you know, these people are pumping, you know, teams in and out. And I was like, you know, wow.
Right.
And you got people barking orders at you and demanding and talking about subjects you may not even want to talk about. I've told people, yeah, if you're talking to a child spirit, get down on your knee and bring the father or bring the mother out of you and ask what their favorite colors are and what their favorite toy was or cartoon. Get to know them. They don't like to be barked at, and I guess
Right.
it does relate to the adults as well. But you know, I just I felt I was like I bet they so loved that year break. um, say versus boop, boop, boop. Let's see. Do you think you would get better responses or evidence in a location less popular versus one that's extremely popular? So yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I do. Because I've been to places where, like, we call them commercial locations, places that people they rent out to teams. And some of them have the legend of being the most haunted place in Virginia or the most haunted place on the East Coast. And there'll be the places where the least activity seems to happen compared to even certain residential investigations where no one's investigated there before. So I do think there is something to that. Absolutely.
Full Dark says spirituality. It's like it's a crowds in the room in that sense, let alone the physical noisy aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got a bunch of people in there too. You have possible contamination, because you don't know who's whispering and who's coughing or, you know,
Right.
what's going on,
So
shuffling their feet.
I think I more than likely know your answer to this, but I still like to ask people, what is your stance on provoking?
Provoking. We don't, we usually, when we go into a place, kind of like you talked about with, if it's a child spirit, you get down on your knee. We try to go in, of course, with respect to whoever's there, whatever might be there, and talk to them as, hey, we try to start off usually, and sometimes it doesn't always happen. People forget and take a different approach on our team and stuff. But what I like to do is go in and not even treat them as if they're a spirit really, but as if they're a person. Like I
Mm-hmm.
may just say, hey, I'm having trouble seeing where you are in the room because it's dark. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Stuff like that. But if you come and touch this, or come near this, it'll show me where you are. So I try to do stuff like that a lot of times, not to even let them know that they're past. um Now if there's a case where there's something that is without a doubt, the reported activity is all aggressive, um and the normal responses don't work to try to draw it out, then sometimes we'll go in and not necessarily provoke, but kind of talk to it, like, like stand up to it, I should say, more
Right.
so stand up to whatever's there and say, it doesn't show a lot of courage to be picking on this little kid when, you need to be talking to us. You need to tell
Mm-hmm.
us what's going on so we can either help you or, help this kid here. You know what I mean? So
Right.
sometimes we'll take that approach.
Absolutely.
It depends on the situation, of course.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I like is, ooh, when y'all do go into a location, the one thing I like is y'all introduce yourselves, and then you also, after you enter, what is your name? And I was like I love that because it's like you're pulling them into a conversation, like without an, like you said, as a human and with respect and dignity, and it's kind of like, oh, wait a minute, that's different.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And another thing that lets us know too is we kind of get an idea of where everybody is in the room,
Hmm.
you know. So if we hear a voice come up on the recorder, uh, hey, that's Will's voice, or that's my voice, because we know where
Right.
everyone is in proximity to the mic on the recorder.
Um, One question, and I find this interesting, and I think everybody has just a little different idea on it. But why do you think some spirits have a hard time to transcend?
Some of them, I think it's because they feel a tie to the earth. There's something that they can't let go of. It could be something that they feel that they need to do. Maybe somebody that they feel they still need to protect or they still need to be here for. Even some, I would hate to say it, but I think some of them have trouble just leaving what is here behind because they're so attached to it. If they were somebody that had a lot of money or a lot of things, they could be attached to that stuff and not want to let it go. But also, I think that some of them might be afraid of what awaits them when they walk into that light. They
Because
may
you
at
don't know
that
which
point
light you're
question.
walking into.
Right.
That's
Exactly. And some people, they may have not even believed that the afterlife is there. They may believe that you die and that's it. And then when they open their eyes and they realize they're dead and they say, okay, I was wrong. Now what? You know what I mean? That's quite a time to realize that and say, okay, I have to walk towards this light or towards whatever and find out what's on the other side, or else I have to stay here and keep away from it because I don't want to find out what's over there. Maybe that could be something that keeps them here. Just a few theories anyway.
That's interesting. And for me, it's because I've watched so many people, and you have some say, well, and I watched one team where the lady did not want to leave the house. This was the house she had built. She loved this house, adored this house, and kind of gave the family a hard time. And honestly, all they did was they were like, well, the living, she loves this house too. So you have the same goals. And it ended up turning out that they were able to live together happily. And but then there was a case where a lady hangs herself, and the big question is, why is she still around? Could it be because in the 1700s she committed the worst thing you could do and can't even be buried on hallowed ground, and she's terrified that, like we said, which light would she go to? So that's very interesting. Very.
Yeah,
Now,
absolutely.
have your team ever experienced anything dark and nasty? I don't like to use the demonic word because it's such a rare thing for people to really come across. So, have y'all ever had anything?
Yeah, there's been a few cases like that. Yeah, where there has been something, like I said, genuinely bothering people. They were coming ill, unexplained illnesses, pets just dying out of the blue, and the vets couldn't explain it. Um, Being growled at, their cabinet doors opening and closing, and dishes falling out, and just all kinds of stuff going on that had them really stressed out. I remember one couple, they probably should have seen the red flag, but the realtor wouldn't even come and let them in the house. When they bought they ended up, he wanted this house. It's like, oh, this looks like a good deal and nice piece of land and everything, but they wouldn't let him in. So when he bought the house, he literally had to come and clip the lockbox off the door because the realtor wouldn't have anything to do with it, and didn't say why. But stuff started happening when they moved in, and there were some people in there that were doing maintenance that were chased out, and
Oh,
just strange things happening to them as they lived there. And the people ended up moving out of the house because nothing really seemed to work for them.
and that's funny because I ended up across this guy who lived um, in St. Louis, and he loved looking at all the old historic homes and everything in St. Louis. But he's sensitive, and it's funny some of the stuff he comes across, and he's come across two realtors that were like, "No, here's the keys." And of course,
Right.
he goes in there and he's like, "Oh, this is oh." No, he's like, they just need to tear this house down.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, like you said, that's red flags right there. Your realtor won't do that. Um. Oh, and Saber has a question. What about reincarnation?
It's interesting. There's, you question, you kind of wonder, because there are some compelling stories about people that have had these thoughts they shouldn't have. And I've often wondered if in these cases, if there is the possibility that the spirit himself of this person could inhabit a mind or could somehow send a message to a mind, or get this person, take for example, if I can explain this right, let's say you have a living person, you have the spirit there, and the spirit wants to have you see what he or she went through. If there's some kind of a way they can actually step inside you or affect you to have you go through these memories and experience these memories if you're their own, I wonder about that. There was a pretty cool case in Yorktown where there was a lady who, she had all kinds of stuff happening in her house, particularly whenever she was going out on a date. It got really bad, and it turned out that her house was her house was haunted by this 1700s barkeep who believed she was the same barmaid that he was in love with way back in colonial times. And a medium came into the house and actually told her, she said, "You are this woman reincarnated." And then
Oh
another
wow.
medium up in New York, the lady ended up moving up to New York, probably so she could have a dating life without a ghost following her around. I don't know. But she moved up to New York, and another medium came to her up there and said, "Hey, there's a spirit that's following you around, and you and he," she said, "I'm getting that you and he were lovers in 3 past lives, going all the way back to the time of Jesus." So you wonder where this stuff comes from. I don't know. I don't know.
All right. So I mean, some of the things that I researched a little bit into Hans Holzer, and who we, I mean, one time is enough for me. I don't want to come back. I don't. I
Right.
just Saber has another question for you. Have you ever been to a location where shadows have been seen?
Yes, yes, quite a few. Um, I can't say I've seen figures myself that appeared as shadows on, I want to say, 2 occasions that stand out of all of them. But yeah, there have been quite a few cases where people have seen shadow figures throughout their house, and it's not always, that's another one that a lot of people will say, well, if it's a shadow figure, it's evil, or if it's a dark figure, it's evil. But it seems to be to me that it's not always associated with something evil or something malevolent. Sometimes these people have not any kind of
Mhm.
negative activity going on at their house, and they're seeing these shadow figures. So I think that a lot of times it might even be the spirit's ability to manifest. Maybe they don't have the energy or whatever it takes for them to manifest into a full blown detailed apparition, and the most they can do is be a shadow of their former selves. I
Mhm.
don't know.
That was what I was about to ask you about that, because you do have some people that have different views on it. I've seen a shadow person. Of course, at the time I was 16, so I didn't like it, and it kept getting bigger, but it didn't give me, you know, malevolent thoughts, or it just was there. I just kind of ignored it. But you do
Right.
have some people that think these shadow people are, their intent is to make you harm yourself and make you do things and hurt yourself. I was like, oh my goodness, okay.
I think a lot of that comes from like scary pasta or creepy pasta or stuff like that.
Stuff my 13-year-old, because I
Right.
had to explain to him, Slender Man's not real, honey. It's not
Right.
real.
Yeah, because the amount of people that think they saw Slender Man, and that's one you can actually trace back to the guy that came up with this story.
Right.
But shadow figures, I don't think by any means that the cases show that it's 100% malevolent every time a shadow figure is there. There's a weird, it's kind of weird though. There's a typical one that seems to show up at many cases, and they always describe him as wearing kind of a hat, like a flat brimmed hat. And it's crazy. Why this is this just somebody out of time, out of history, that from back when they wore hats like that, or is there some kind of connection between all these cases that see this guy with the brimmed
Well,
hat?
it's interesting because there's a YouTuber I watch, and he actually got a picture of it.
Oh wow.
Same thing. The hat. I mean, same thing. And of course, this is on one of these old cell phones, and he still has the picture, but it just blew my mind. It's hat dude, hat
That's
guy. I
cool.
mean, yeah.
It's so common. And a lot of them you wonder too, because there's actually, in a lot of these cases with shadow figures, they share a lot of the same characteristics that something involving an extraterrestrial
Mm-hmm.
would share. So we've kind of wondered, and at least in some of these cases, could they actually be of
Ah,
otherworldly nature?
the interesting thing is, I watched the live event for the Conjuring House, the 3-day live event for Halloween. And one of the subjects got brought up because they talk about, seeing UFOs and everything. And Corey was talking about him and Jen one night saw a shadow person, and it was right there. They both saw it. And when she popped up, it disappeared. But as time went on, they started really looking into things. And she was like, well, I think it kind of looks like Slenderman. And of course, Corey was like, no, it doesn't. They believe now, after looking at pictures, that it might have been a gray.
Oh, that's interesting. That's pretty cool.
I thought that was very, very, very interesting. Um, I promise I'm getting to you guys. Um, TD, yes, I think more than likely the guy in Missouri, Illinois, is the same guy. He's such a sweet. This guy's so sweet, and he doesn't talk about him having abilities at all. Um, and I had just watched his videos and happened across it, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute! He picked up something." And I wouldn't say anything for a long time because, yeah, everybody's talking about the house, but then somebody mentioned something paranormal, and he said, yeah. And I was like, oh, so every time he went through a house, I'm like, you experienced this. And he's like, yeah. How did you know? I was like, I don't. Sweet, very, very wonderful guy. And I'm so sad because he's having to back away from YouTube. So to deal with family issues, and rightfully so, because family comes first. Sabra says that her 8-year-old saw at least 3 shadow figures in the upstairs hallway going into the bathroom.
Oh wow. Yeah, of course, children are, not often, at least, are more sensitive than we are. So it seems they can see things that we can't.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen cases where kids have tapped into something that was there that the mother had no idea about the history of the land, and something they've seen was lined up with the history and with events that happened.
Oh yeah. Um, let's see. Hang on. She said, "When at a location, have you ever taken a picture of a mirror and captured something in the mirror?"
I can't say for 100%. We've got a lot of questionable pictures. And I know we'll often look when we take a picture, we'll zoom in and check the windows and any surfaces or anything that be reflective. But I can't say 100% that I remember a picture from a mirror specifically that had something in it.
Oh, and a gray is I'm to be honest, and I mean, where I live right next to Kennesaw Mountain, which is one of the top 10 bloodiest battles. So this whole area is just, war torn, bad. And I've lived in Holland where, my husband's city was bombed 3 times. Never experienced a UFO or aliens or anything. But from my understanding, a gray is one race of aliens. If I got that right. I'm not good with aliens and cryptids.
I'm not sure. That's another thing. Like, I'm not sure 100% where they get that from. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if it's more so kind of conspiracy theories. Like, yeah, the government's got aliens, and this is the two races that they have, and it kind of, blew up. I don't know. So I kind of keep an open mind when it comes to that. If there are actually the blues and the grays, or there are, if that's just something that's, kind of urban legend, I should say, maybe. I don't know. I'm
I,
open to it.
I've been delving a little bit more into it. I mean, it's mind blowing. I mean, they talk about lizard people. There's
Yeah.
one guy I follow that's in the military, and he was in the army, and he was saying in the Middle East, he ran across 3 reptilians.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I remember a lady that contacted us about that. Her husband was a like draconian, reptilian vampire or something like that. And these guys were like shapeshifters and all kinds of stuff. Like the shapeshifters that were the cop that was at her apartment was a shapeshifter, and he would actually shapeshift into something and come in and get some coffee and then shapeshift back out. But I looked her up and she was like on the CIA list. So I just told our case manager, I was like, hey, there's a voicemail. You might want to call this lady and talk to her. And I just kind of left it over there. It just and then I waited for her to call me up because I wanted her to hear the story. You know what I mean? I forget the extent of it, but it was involved. But when she called me up, she's like, why did you have me call that lady? And I was like, I just wanted somebody else to hear this story.
Well, it's interesting because Corey Heinzen, owns the country house, that he was at the farmhouse outside, and he says, I've never gotten freaked out, never, over anything that goes on. He says, but one night, he says, I am not joking, there was this huge craft in the sky with fighter jets in formation. And he was a Marine, so he's like the formation they are in was an attack formation. And he said it just scared the daylights out of him. Not the UFO, but that these fighter jets are in this attack formation. He's like, oh my God.
Yeah, something bad. Something
Right.
bad's going on.
And
Yeah.
he said it went right across. I mean, freaked him
Wow.
out. So I was like, that's pretty, interesting to freak him out. And I just wanted to say, yeah, TD, the guy is so sensitive, and bless his heart, he goes into all these historical homes, because that's his thing. He likes to, sell them, fix them up. And I even told him his second house he bought, I was like, there's somebody in your house with you. And he's like, oh, I know. Oh, I know. I said, but I don't like the basement. And where he was at, he was able to have, I don't know if you know Coyote Sam.
No, I don't.
He's from Alton, Illinois, and really, really sweet guy. Got into the paranormal and then ended up getting involved in Native Americans and learning to be a shaman and whatnot. He recently passed away, but the guy that I watch actually had Coyote Sam come in and come into his basement. And he's like, "Yep, you got something in here." He says, "But your basement is completely limestone."
Oh, wow.
He's like, "You got to cover it up immediately." um, so like Sabra says, she says, "I'm a witch," so she goes both ways, light and dark, but a gray in the paranormal. And she wants to know if she sends me a pic, if I can forward it to you to take a look.
Absolutely.
Oh, and then she's like, "Oh, shifters." That's a good one. So I guess the one question I have, like, because as we're talking about UFOs, there's a lot of people who've been at haunted locations claiming to witness UFOs. Do you believe that spirits and UFOs go hand in hand?
I believe that sometimes they can be mistaken. That sometimes what people might think are ghosts are actually extraterrestrial. I will say what's an interesting concept, though, and I've posed this question before. I said, all these trips, we don't know how many they're taking to Earth, right? At some point, somebody had to have a bad trip here, and their ship crashed, and they died. So I wonder if at this location you could actually find ghosts of aliens. It's an interesting thought,
That
right?
is an interesting thought. The one thing I thought was interesting, somebody was like, "We're so multi-dimensional," and they said it's so easy for spirits in one dimension, UFOs and aliens in another dimension, and then our dimension. And she's like, I was like, "Oh," but I like that one because I've heard people say, maybe it's UFOs that and it's the aliens are coming to, or the ETs are coming to visit you. And I don't know, I've never experienced it.
Yeah, because there were some cases, and I don't remember the specific details, but I remember the location, being at the house, the lady's house, and there were some things she was telling me, and then I started getting these kind of indicators that this was something more than ghosts that she was talking about. And I forget, like I said, I forget the bulk of the reports, but she mentioned like a light that would come in through her window. And once she mentioned that, and I forget what caused me to ask. I said, "Do you ever see any like strange lights around here?" She's like, "Now that you mention it, yeah." Then she told me about the light through a window, and it looked like at one point there was something that lifted off from the field across from her, lifted off into the sky. And after that, I was like, this sounds like, of course, like she's dealing with some extraterrestrials here, and it had her thinking she was dealing with ghosts.
That's so interesting. Oh my goodness. I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, because, we're talking about UFOs, but y'all also do cryptids. And again,
Right.
on my side, the only cryptid I've ever dealt, and I have not personally dealt with it, I've come across one. And um, I was watching another paranormal team, and everybody kept screaming, "Oh, there's a demon, there's a demon." I was like, "No, it's worse. It's an elemental. Leave it the hell alone and walk away." I don't like elementals. You don't know what you're going to get. Some of them just
Right.
ignore you, and some others make your life hell. And I remember being out somewhere, and I was like, "Nope, I'm not going that way. I'm going this way." Why? I don't mess with elementals. I don't like them.
Right.
I have
Right.
respect for them. I shouldn't say I don't like them. I have respect for them. But have
Just
y'all
don't
come
want to, yeah.
across anything like that?
Like an elemental. I mean, we've had cases where that was the report. Even one where this guy had he believed were actually leprechauns. Um, I can't say we've ever found any evidence of them, But this guy was putting out. He said someone told him to put out plates of milk, and because leprechauns apparently like to drink milk off of a plate. I don't know. So he put out these plates, and he said he would come out in the morning, and the milk would be gone from the plates. But yeah, I haven't seen any or experienced any firsthand. We've had, like I said, we've had cases where people thought they were dealing with them, but that's the extent of it.
I know there's a sweet little Irish lady. She lives here but does ghost tours over in Ireland. And she says, my husband grew up the Celtic way. She says, but I was always taught every night after dinner, she says, I take tea leaves and sprinkle them in the garden. She says, sometimes people will leave sweets and stuff like that. And everybody was like, why? She goes, to keep the fairies happy. Which I have heard Hinsdale House has some fairies, and people
Really?
reported cryptids out up towards the woods.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, we spent the night out there at the Hinsdale House before. That was a cool location.
Yeah, they Mike Ricksecker said they saw little blue lights twinkling, and so they thought, okay, we'll just take an apple, and he just bit into the apple because he's like, they're little. And he said, I knew they weren't fireflies because it wasn't the season, it was cold. And he says, they're blue, they weren't yellow. So they just left an apple out there, and the next morning, it's weird. You see these little tiny chunks that have been pulled out of the apple. I was like, okay, that's weird. And another investigator says he actually saw some kind of horned, like, I want to try and remember what he says. He did say it was like a horned creature, but I want to say like deer horns.
Oh, really? Jeez, yeah, that doesn't.
I'm not good with stuff like that. Everybody's like, "Oh, your family's from the mountains. Got any good Bigfoot stories?" I'm like, "Nope, sorry." And you'd think my family on my father's side, they didn't make the moonshine, but they would go pick it up and then run it. My great grandfather, or no, my grandfather is the moonshine runner. And I'm like, no, nobody's ever talked about Bigfoot. Sorry.
Oh, wow.
I know y'all did a Bigfoot hunt.
Yeah, we go out looking for them, and I mean, we haven't found anything, but we'll go out to places where there's sightings of Bigfoot. Sometimes we'll just throw on a backpack and go out there and set up camp somewhere, and other times they're established campsites that we'll go visit, and just basically spend the weekend hanging out by the campfire and passively looking for Bigfoot. Sometimes we'll set up trail cameras, and one cool method is to put like fishing line around your campsite, and you put it at different levels, right? And you keep it loose, like you just basically loosely put it from one tree to the next, put a little push pin in there so it can slide out if something walks into it. And you check it in the morning, and you can see if anything walked into your site and how many of those it broke. Like, say, one is at the 4 foot, one is at the 5 foot, one is at the 6 foot. And if something comes through and all three of them are gone, that's something at least 6 foot tall walked into that campsite. That hasn't happened yet, but it's something interesting to try.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I've again delved into it. I'm not good with cryptids, just because I've never, and elementals I have, but other than that I haven't. But it's interesting to hear what people say about Bigfoot, and that I've heard some people say there's portals that they can come in and out of from another dimension. To me, it's just interesting and incredible.
Yeah, I've heard that theory of them being interdimensional beings. And some people have said they're aliens and stuff like that. I personally, I think there's something tied to the land, because these if these do exist, they've been around since the Native Americans, and there's the Native Americans, there's some evidence of them speaking of these creatures, and depending on their level of intelligence, they probably learned to get around the woods as well as the Native Americans. Maybe even one learned from the other. So they could probably very well be in plain sight, and we wouldn't even notice unless we really knew how to navigate and look through the woods to find the thing that's right there, and like I said, in plain view.
Yeah. Sabra said something very interesting here. Actually, we are the aliens from somewhere else. We were dumped here from another planet. And the interesting thing is, my husband's more into, the alien thing. And the one thing he says is, he's like, all our DNA is all tied to everything. All the animals, we all have some. Oh my goodness, he's gonna have to pop on here and explain it. I mean, he's even gone as far as saying that maybe Noah's Ark was maybe this big vessel, that they called the Ark, and because me and my husband get into these really detailed talks, and he's like, "Where do you get a woolly mammoth elephant and say, an African and Asian animal elephant came from the woolly mammoth?" He's like, "That's you know." He says, "Where did horses come from? Where did they, we talk about all these really interesting things, which I don't even know. Hello, honey. Hello. And he believes we had giants, red-headed giants. You've probably heard that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. The interesting thing that I love about that most people don't know is the Bible does talk about red-headed giants.
Yeah, the book of it's one of the apocryphal the book of Enoch, I believe it is.
I think so. Where is Papa? He's not listening. Ah, the all-knowing eye.
Hello.
Didn't you say in the Bible they talked about red-headed giants?
Yeah, the Bible has passages about, because that's the same where Goliath came from. They talk about giants, and I can't get the verse right now, but I'll get it. Don't worry. But the thing is again, I always say, like, that ark that Noah had, it's not an ark, it's a spaceship. This is where our modern animals come from. This is where we come from. It's not creation is done because we were set up here. We were set up to roam this land here. And that's why you find in if you go back in 12 centuries before Christ, you'll find old stone hieroglyphs that show that people are praying to the heavens, that they are holding up to the heavens.
That's interesting.
And with the first writings that the Samaritans have, they talk about leaders that lived for 1,000 years.
And those were the aliens.
But we cannot live for 1,000 years. But they have chronically they have put it down and said that the next leaders they had lived 500 years, and then they had a leader that lived 100 years, which is the waning power of those that came from outer space.
But see, there had to be a higher power to create.
Yeah, I don't think
came to visit us.
I don't think we come from apes. That's the whole problem that I have with it. Because look, have you ever seen any other ape now, basically in Darwin's way, getting more and more better and more human, or more and more something else? It doesn't happen.
Right, that one that's like right in the middle.
Right.
Because that's what we were talking about. I was like, if Darwin was right in saying what he is, we should still be seeing that keep going on.
That evolution should
Something.
still be happening. And that's one thing. If you look at the picture of a horse that's being drawn in the prehistoric time or later on, the horse still looks like a horse. But when you hear scholars come out and they do a thing on horse and they say like, oh, this 3 feet thing is probably the predecessor from the horse. Where is your proof of that?
Shetland pony.
Because where's that middle bit? Where's those horses that looks a little bit different? Why are we not finding these things? Why are we not finding? We have mammoths and we have elephants. Where is that missing link where the mammoth lost all his hair and then traveled south somehow because he was up north and now he traveled south? Where is that? And why only to Africa and why only to India? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
They come up with all these things. It's like, oh, the mammoth, yeah, that was the predecessor from the elephant. No, it wasn't. The mammoth doesn't exist anymore. The elephant.
They say they do in Alaska. They say they do.
Yeah, the elephant was brought to us like all modern animals, except for example, a crocodile. Now I can see why a crocodile survived whatever the aliens did to the Earth. Because you can say, yeah, a meteorite struck the Earth. Well, yes and no, because you really don't have any proof of that. And secondly, why did some animals survive and other animals not survive? But if you think about an alien race that comes to the Earth and then wipes the Earth, basically from the animals that were there or the lizards that were there or whatever was here, and they wipe it and then say, now let's here you got some animals, here you got human beings, we're going to make this and we're going to cultivate this Earth.
Saber says the chicken is the predecessor of the T-Rex.
Yeah, right. I can really see that. The T-Rex all of a sudden became smaller and smaller and smaller and got feathers and whatever. Yeah.
They act like it, them and turkeys.
Well, it's not to say that aliens took DNA from those prehistoric animals that we have and then put it into their way of having a earthling kind of animal. I do not dispute that.
See that
I think they could have taken things off it. They could have taken things from the Neanderthal that was here and taken that to make the modern human being. Because scientists always go different and different. Because scientists started out with saying, okay, the first man came from Africa. Okay. Now scientists are saying, no, the first man came from Asia. So they don't. What are they talking about? They don't even know what they're talking about. They
Science always does change.
For
It
sure,
does
is
change.
that the Neanderthal was different from the human being. But who doesn't say that if we human beings experiment with animals and experiment with other things, don't you think that anything from another race from outer space doesn't experiment with something? Because wouldn't you make something that is more suitable for living on the Earth? Wouldn't you make that? Like we basically make things that is more suitable for outer space?
So Saber says, what about the North Star and the pyramid directly under it?
Well, again, you can say all these things because what about those? I think it's in Peru or something. The big lines that they pulled that they made a hummingbird and whatever that you can only see from a very high height. Why would they do that? Why would you make drawings on Earth for people that people cannot see because people cannot fly, but something else from above can see it? That's the same with the pyramids. the way that they're set up, the way that they're like the solar system is kind of like saying like, hey, hold on, who thought about that? Who looked from above down to make sure that that constellation was right?
Now, Saber has a good question. Do you believe in the parallel universe?
That's not for me.
The parallel universe. That's I don't know. I'm open to possibilities, I suppose.
That's the one thing I find so interesting, especially in the paranormal world, because we're such a big umbrella. I mean, people get so offended so easy, but it's like, no, you have to keep an open mind when it comes to spirits. You've got to keep an open mind when it comes to cryptids. You have to keep an open mind when it comes to extraterrestrials and UFOs. And I was like, it's just critical thinking. I mean, nobody forces anybody to, you're going to believe this.
Right.
But that's what I love about it, because it's always so evolving and changing, and it keeps your mind going and thinking of all the possibilities. I mean,
Right.
it's interesting. It's mind-blowing to me. So, okay, we're going to change things up. What are your pet peeves while investigating?
Pet peeves. I don't know if it's really a pet peeve by any means, but I guess one thing is like not giving enough time for responses between questions. Just like firing off questions and
Yeah.
not giving any time to respond. But it's an easy thing to do because in the moment, especially if something's interacting, people, their adrenaline gets going and they want to know more and they want to ask and they're hoping to get someone to pop through, and they forget, maybe I should leave a little bit of time for something to respond, something to receive the question and put the answer back to me.
Because sometimes they don't answer you immediately. You got to give them a little time.
Right.
Full
Exactly.
Dark says always keep an open mind. Absolutely. That is what is so wonderful about this, is you have to keep a, who knows. Saber says time slips.
Time slips. I don't think I'm too familiar with that.
I'm trying to think. I know like and I go back to the Conjuring house because you got so much stuff going on and I don't think it's I think it's the house, but I think it's the land as well. But I know Corey and Jen have told people that upstairs middle bedroom to be careful, even set a timer at like 15 minutes, because he says we've seen people go in there and investigate, and they think they've spent five minutes, and they come out and they've been a couple hours in there.
Oh yeah. Actually, I know what you're talking about. I've heard about this up at Old House Woods. I forget what they called it. It was something, I forget. It was an interesting name, but yeah, these guys that went into the woods. It seemed like 30 minutes, and it turned out to be like 5 hours.
And I don't know. To me, that's hard again. If you're talking about time slips, I mean, is it the spirit world that's doing it, or is it the alien world doing it?
That's a good question. And also, is it like we talk about spirits that have been here for 100 years, and why do they not know their spirits? Well, because it seems like it's been a matter of moments to them. Maybe we're kind of getting a taste of that. Maybe we're actually stepping beyond that veil on towards the other side, where hey, to them now on their side, we've been there for 5 hours, but to us, it only seemed like 30 minutes. We're kind of getting a taste of that.
Mhm.
Maybe it has something to do with that. I don't know. It's interesting.
Now, my naughty guy who goes by kinda off, Frank, he says, "What about Santa Claus?" And I'm going to answer that first. Yes, there is a Santa Claus, there's a tooth fairy, there's the Easter bunny. Did I miss any? I think that's it. Yes. Yes, there's something wrong with you if you don't believe in Santa Claus.
Yeah,
Ugh.
absolutely. I stand firm. There's definitely a Santa Claus. There's even been these reports, where uh, a guy, he was a kid. He was writing this as an adult, and he looked out his window, and he saw this guy dressed as Santa Claus, um, taking this thing down the street. And his mom saw it, and then the guy just disappeared right in front of them. It's interesting. It's interesting. And if you look it up, there are a couple of weird reports like that. There are some genuine reports of these people that saw somebody that resembled Santa Claus, and there were all kinds of paranormal elements involved in what they saw surrounding them.
Yes.
I will
Yes.
tell you, one night I was on my way to church on Christmas Eve, and I was probably a teenager, and I it was snowing, and it was snowing pretty heavy. And I see this guy walking across the front yard of one of the houses in the neighborhood, and he was dressed as Santa Claus, right? And it's gonna sound weird. Now, my first initial thought was like, oh, that guy dressed up as Santa Claus and he's going to, surprise his
Right.
kids or something like that on Christmas Eve. But the strange thing was, nobody else saw him. Like, I mentioned him, and they were like, "What guy are you talking about?" No one else in the car saw him. I think my couple of my brothers were in like another car. No one else saw this guy. So I kind of questioned that. I was like, "What did I just see there?
Yeah, there you go.
What did I just see?" You never know.
There is the Santa Claus. And
Absolutely.
wait a minute. Okay, Saber. She says no Easter bunny because they ate him last year. And I laughed very hard because I had to learn the Dutch culture. And for Easter, you eat hare. And I looked at my husband. I said, "You eat the Easter bunny?" And he's like, "What?" I was like, "You eat the." He's like, "What do y'all have?" I said, "Where I'm from," I said, "we usually have like ham." You ate the Easter bunny.
I guess that's like, if you think about it, the Thanksgiving turkey, right? Although he's not kind of a big creature that comes wandering around, but the Thanksgiving turkey is what we eat. It makes sense that, hey, you'd eat the Easter bunny.
I was like, "Oh my goodness!" Ate the Easter bunny. Um, now Saber says it's not very commonly heard of, but I've heard of it here. She's in Connecticut. And there were somebody would go around their door, go to something, and then they were totally different realm and different era.
Yeah, it's like they walk into a different time.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of that one as well. And um when it comes to that whole area in Rhode Island, you had the King Louis War. And I don't know if it's protected by the natives, but what I do think is, I mean, King Louis slaughtered the natives in that area, especially the area where the farmhouse is and all around. It was just a nasty war. So, I mean, could they have put protection on there? Yeah. Um, but I will ask you two more questions.
Sure.
What question do people ask you when you tell them you are a paranormal investigator?
They asked me, what is the scariest thing I'd ever seen?
Ah, That's better than "Are you serious?"
Oh, no, you'd be surprised how little I don't think I've ever one time some guy was like, y'all for real? Like you do this for real? You're not a joke? And I was like, that's a real thing. But
Mhm.
yeah, usually people ask, oh, what's the strangest thing you've seen?
That's awesome. And the last question, what are 3 non-paranormal items you would bring to an investigation?
3 non-paranormal items? Yeah, are you talking like things that I would use for the investigation?
Yeah.
Like the Etch-a-Sketch, like that type of thing?
Yeah.
Or well, we already know about that, so that's not really interesting. Let's see. It's 3 things that are not paranormal. That's a really good question. I mean, because I look at everything that I'm bringing in that context as it's being used for the paranormal. Coffee. All right.
Yep.
There we go. There's
Yep.
one.
Yep. Lots of coffee.
Yeah. Depending on where it is, or how long it's going to be. Combos. That's
Ah,
another one right there. Usually the buffalo chicken combos.
yep.
There's got to be a third one here. I don't know. I'm drawing a blank on this third one. I got to say, honestly.
Frank said toilet paper.
Oh, well, for the if now, yeah, actually, depending on the location, that's a good thing to scope out the bathroom situation. I usually do that. I mean, I don't bring toilet paper, but I ask about the bathroom situation and how far the nearest, Wawa or whatever is.
Right.
But especially if we're going in the woods, if we're going camping, a lot of these places they don't have running water and bathrooms. So yeah, we definitely got to bring some toilet paper.
Oh, yes. And I just want Gypsy Rose has just stepped in. Hello, dear. Unfortunately, you hit us right at the end. Because I would just hate to. Is that why I'm missing my toilet paper? Is what Eric said. Gypsy Rose is a really good channel. You might want to check out. He does a lot of Bigfoot and cryptids. He does paranormal as well. So
Oh,
you will get
cool.
a kick out of him. I mean, Eric is awesome. And with you being in the cryptids and Bigfoot and all that, you will absolutely get a kick out of him. He was very, very sweet and had me on his channel to interview. So,
Well, that's awesome.
but he's a good guy. I like him and the way, you know, they're just they good channel. You just crack up and laugh too, and you're welcome. So I'm not going to keep you any longer. I absolutely appreciate your time and sharing all your experiences. You have been absolutely so wonderful and wonderful to work with to get this all planned up. So I really thank you so much.
Yeah,
This
really
has been
appreciate you
fun.
having me. Thank you.
Thank you. And have a wonderful night. And I'm going to keep watching.
Thank you. You have a good night.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. And I'm so bummed, Eric. Oh, I'm so bummed. But thank you for jumping in. Thank you, Frank and Sabra and Selena. And let's see how far I can go because it won't go all the way to the top. There's TD. There was Christina Bell. I'm going to try and get a question pulled out of Christina because, I mean, she's just too sweet and she needs to pop in here. Let's see. Michael, of course, we got to thank you. And oh my goodness, Janine, thank you so much for popping in. Thank you. If it wasn't for you guys, I mean, y'all make it fun. You have awesome questions. So I thank you guys. You guys are important to this channel. So appreciate it. And before we leave, in not next week, the following week, I am horrible with dates, but you will get it. I'm interviewing two gentlemen who has never, I shouldn't say never, they don't do interviews, and they have been wonderful to agree to do an interview with me. And I'm telling you right now, you don't want to miss these guys. Not only because of their experience, but other things. So this is going to be fantastic and fun, and don't miss it. Have a good night. Have a wonderful rest of your week and a wonderful weekend. I love you guys. Thank you.